So we are going to talk about antecedent-based interventions, and these are some of my favorite interventions to put into place. So what are antecedent-based interventions? So they are a collection of strategies in which we make environmental modifications, and we'll talk about what some of those look like in a minute, that prompt the learner. We're going to change the conditions in the setting that prompt the learner with ASD to be less likely to engage in whatever behavior it is that's interfering with their learning. So what I like about antecedent-based interventions is that they are effective for a wide age range of kids, so preschool age through high school age. And they are a collection of strategies that we put into place before the learner with autism has any sort of difficulties. So I don't need to wait for there to be a problem to go ahead and put these into place, because we know these are excellent evidence-based practices that can go into place before the learner with autism has any kind of behavioral or learning challenges. So how are we going to use this evidence-based practice? So we know it's for preschool age through high school age. We're going to use it to reduce the effects of interfering behaviors. And the most awesome thing is that it's used to increase on-task behaviors. So it sounds complicated, but it's really not. And we're going to look at what this actually looks like. Antecedent-based interventions require us to be a bit of a behavior detective. We don't assume that we know why behavior is happening. I think sometimes as educators we feel like this is happening to drive me crazy, but probably it's not. There's probably a reason why this behavior is taking place. So what we look at is our ABCs of behavior. Just like we teach ABCs of reading, we have ABCs of behavior. So the A part stands for antecedent, which means what happens right before the behavior occurs. And the B is the behavior. So give me a good description of what the behavior looks like. The student hit another student. The student refused to complete the writing assignment. What did the behavior look like? And the C is the consequences. What happened after the behavior occurred? Was the student removed from the setting? Did everyone laugh? What happened directly after the behavior occurs? So we bring it back to looking at the ABCs of behavior. The next several slides, we will look at some actual definitions and some examples of antecedent-based interventions. And what I'm hoping is that when I talk about these, you'll be like, I already do that. So that would be fabulous. They are all good examples of what good practices look like for our kiddos with autism. And the nice thing about antecedent-based interventions is that they are effective for a variety of learners. So not just your students with autism, they are going to be effective for a large variety of students that you may work with if you are in the special education world. So the first one is setting clear behavioral expectations and making sure that we teach those expectations to the student. For our students with autism, those behavioral expectations may need to be made as concrete as possible. And the other thing to think about is when we're setting behavioral expectations, our students work with a large variety of adults sometimes. They may have several teachers, several classroom assistants, the PE teacher, lots of different people come in and out of their orbit in the school system. So making sure that behavioral expectations are consistent across classrooms whenever possible and across settings when appropriate is going to be very helpful for them. Another good example of antecedent-based intervention, and now priming is considered its own evidence-based practice. There's enough research out there that they've put it into its own category. Priming is an excellent example of good practice. So priming is setting kids up for success. So the way that I used this in my classroom was that right before we went out to the playground, I reminded the kids of the rules. So I'm telling them what they need to know right in that minute. And giving them kind of a heads up of, hey, we're going out to the playground, guys. What are the rules for the playground? All right, the rules are that we only play on the playground structures that have wood chips. We're not on our playground. We were not able to be on the grass. So we need to stay on the wood chips, guys. Remember, we've got to stay on the wood chips when we go outside of the playground. So it was just reminding them of the rules right before they needed it, or telling them what they need to do right before they get to a classroom. So they're going down to math class. remember the rules for math class. The rules say that if we need help from the teacher, we need to raise our hand if you have a student that struggles with that. Another way that you can use priming is sometimes I would pre-teach skills or pre-teach a little bit of the information. So if I had a student who was in a regular reading classroom, maybe we would read some of the passage before they got to the classroom so they kind of knew what to expect and what was going to happen before they got there. Another good strategy is behavior momentum. So students with disability frequently experience a lot of failures. And so if you experience a lot of failures, eventually you give up, right? And you get frustrated easily. And if you feel like you're not going to be able to do something, then it's easier to just not to try. So behavioral momentum says do something easy before we do something really hard. A good example with this is with my personal child. When we were learning fractions, we would do 1 or 2 math problems that I knew he knew how to do so that he could have some success before we had a big struggle. So good strategies, behavior momentum, priming, and just having clear behavioral expectations. Placing specific demands. So making sure that we are placing specific demands. So sit versus sit down in your chair and show me that you're ready to work. Sometimes when students are upset or if students are having difficulty processing and listening, especially students with autism, they get lost in our words. And I don't think we realize that sometimes our directions are vague and maybe we're giving them too much information at once. So being aware that we need to place specific demands. So sit while you're pointing at a chair versus a lot of words in the direction. Another good antecedent-based intervention is offering choice. I don't think that students with disabilities frequently have a lot of choices made for them. So things like, and I always think about adult-controlled choices. So things that won't make a difference in my instruction or in what I'm trying to engage the student in, but will give that student a sense of control, because we all like to have control sometimes. So think about ways that you can give them back some of the control by offering adult-controlled choices. So a choice of reinforcer. I had a student that I worked with, and we were getting ready to work on reading, math, a reading activity and a math activity, and it didn't make any difference which one we did first. So I let him pick. What do you want to work on, the math first? Do you want to work on the reading first? Which one do you want to pick? I worked with a student who sometimes struggled to follow directions. He had a lot of oppositional defiant type issues. And so when he would come into the classroom, there was a desk on the left side of the classroom and a desk on the right side of the classroom. And I would say, which desk are you going to sit in today? This desk or this desk? And I would point to each desk, because it didn't matter to me which desk he sat in. It mattered to me that he sat. Which pencil do you want to use, the purple pencil or the yellow pencil? Today, are you going to do this activity with markers or crayons, or are you going to use a pencil? Just some of those simple adult control choices can make a big difference in the day for students with autism in getting compliance and getting them to become more engaged in the activities. The next few slides, we will look at visual supports, which is another component of antecedent-based interventions, and they are also their own evidence-based practice. Visual supports are a great way to support your students with autism. They are very much an evidence-based practice and strategy that can be utilized. And the nice thing is that there are thousands of already made visual supports out there. The component and the thing that you have to remember is that students won't know automatically how to use a visual support. We have to teach them. How to use the visual support. So it's important to know that whatever visual supports you're putting into place, then someone needs to teach them how it works and probably model that as the adult for a while. This is just a visual example of bus rules. It's from Indiana Resource Center for Autism. So I did not create this, but I just thought it was a good way to show you can use visual supports everywhere, right? School bus, cafeteria, the lunchroom. We can use visual supports in our classroom, in the bathroom. And take a minute and think about your day as an adult. I see visual supports everywhere, right? If you drive a car, there are red lights, stop signs are visual support. All of those kind of come back into the same thought that we're teaching kids. So when we're teaching students to use visual supports, we're teaching them a life skill that all of us use. We just don't really process it out or think about it. These visual bus rules just give us kind of a way for kids to remember what we're asking them to do, especially if they can't read or they need some sort of prompt for that. These are other great examples of visual supports. So the one on the left side of your screen that says quiet is just a flip ring of visual directions. I like these for words that I have to say a lot. These come from a website called Victories in Autism, and I'm going to provide the link to that in the resource list of this module. But Victories in Autism, so the way that this works is that these are a way to make words that we have to say frequently visual. So you can see the edge of the little eyes, and that means look. The little hands are for hands down. There is one in the very back, the pink, and it kind of looks like there's an arm being bitten and it's no biting. There are just a lot of words that we as educators may have to say. What I do tell staff members is that if these are not the words that you have to say a lot, then make up your own little flip ring cards. These are just conveniently printable, and there are quite a bit of different options for them. So they are a great resource to know about. The visual support on the right side of your screen is break cards, and the way that break cards work is that these are for students who they're done in the middle of a session and they want to break. So I had a student that we taught to use break cards, and he got 2 breaks in the morning and 2 breaks in the afternoon. So there were 2 times during the morning work session that he could look at me and hand me this break card, and I knew that he was a nonverbal student. I knew that that meant that he needed a break. So for us, a break meant 5 minutes. I would set a visual timer, and he would come back to work when that visual timer went off. It took a little bit of time to teach him that, but it was very much worth the effort, because previously when he was done with working, he would flip the desk over. He would flip the desk and throw the materials at whoever was working with him. So teaching him to utilize a break card was a huge impact. It made a big difference in his day in the number of meltdowns and tantrums that we had. This is an example of a visual countdown card. So on the left, you can see the numbers 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. And on the right, it just shows that you're pulling these off. This is handmade or homemade. I just took some yellow construction paper and some index cards and cut them apart. So the way that I have used this in the past is that it's to get students to stop what they're doing, to kind of give them a visual way to see the time passed. So I had a student who liked to go down the slide, and I could not get them off the playground. So I would say, all right, you've got 5 more times to go on the slide, and each time they came down the slide, I would have them pull off the number so that they could visually see, this is how many more times I can go down the slide. I might utilize this for indoor recess. So indoor recess is ending in, you've got 5 more turns at whatever you're doing. So it's not necessarily meant to represent minutes, but it could if you had older students or students who understood that. So just another visual support that you might be able to utilize. And there are hundreds of thousands of different kinds of visual supports out there. So when this training is done, you should just Google autism visual supports, and 1,000 different things will come up. Not all of those will necessarily be good or useful, so just be aware of that, but there are some great examples out there. So a stop sign is a great visual support to teach students. I utilize these in my classroom. I put a stop sign on my teacher desk because I did not want students touching the items on my desk. And there were certain areas of the classrooms that was adult only, right? So I put a stop sign up on some of the filing cabinets that I had because I did not want students bothering those. Now I taught this I worked with a preschooler that would elope from the classroom. He would run away. If you've ever worked with a student who runs out of your classroom and down the hallway, that is very frightening. So we taught him stop and go. We taught it during their large motor movement time of the day, and we kind of played red light, green light, but only we did stop and go signs. And he had an adult who held his hand when they were playing, we called it a game. And when they held up the go sign, all the kids would do whatever movement or walk forward. And then when the teacher would hold up the stop sign, the staff member who was assigned to that child at that time would make certain that he stopped, and she would show him his own little stop sign. So we helped prompt and cue him, and then gave him positive reinforcement. So he got some little some sticker rewards for actually stopping. And then eventually what we did was we put that stop sign on the door of the classroom. It took a few weeks to get to that point, but we put the stop sign on the door of the classroom, and he had been taught that when he saw the stop sign, it meant that he stopped. And when it was time for them to go out of the classroom, they would flip it over to go, and then he would walk out of the classroom. But it stopped him from eloping and from running away outside of the classroom, which was upsetting for all of the adults in that situation. So the other visual supports on this slide is for calming down. We tell kids a lot of times to take a deep breath. Take 3 deep breaths and calm down. But unfortunately, a lot of our students don't know how to take a deep breath. So this is just a visual support for taking a deep breath. And I found this particular visual support on the Boardmaker Share site. So I'm going to breathe in through my nose. So you see the little flower on it. A lot of times I tell kids, smell the flower. And then to get them to blow out, we're saying blow out the candle. So that's what the bottom picture is. So smell the flower, blow out the candle. So that's taking a deep breath. Just a nice way to teach that. It gives it a visual, some visual assistance. This is an example of a wait card and a help card. Frequently when we tell a student to wait, we mean it's never going to happen. So when we ask kids to wait, sometimes they become upset. So I utilized a wait card in a kindergarten classroom for a student with autism, and the teacher had a very large class, and his was blue, and it was a triangle because his favorite color was blue and he liked triangles, and it just said wait. And when he needed to wait, then he would hold the card at his seat. He had a hard time waiting, and he was in a very large classroom. So when you're talking 32 kindergarten students in one classroom, you spend a lot of time waiting because almost everyone in the classroom needs help. So he would hold the card at his seat, and this took some practice and some significant struggles to get it right. But we got there, and he would hold the card at his seat, and it prompted him to stay with his seat and to wait patiently, but it also prompted the adults to come back and help him. It was a good visual way for them to get help. So the teacher ended up making a few different wait cards and utilized them for other students in the class. So it reminded the adults to come back and who it was that needed help, who was waiting. So you could also, the little hand help card, you might also use a help card, same situation. Same type of a thing. You're just going to teach them how it is you want them to use that card, making sure that we give some kind of instruction and practice it. And you may need to give it over and over for a little while before they catch on, but eventually they will. And then it will be a fabulous visual support that you can use. First then cards are another great option for visual supports. So sometimes these get utilized as schedules, but they're really meant to be a motivator. So first we're going to complete whatever this activity is, and then you get whatever the object or whatever the student is desiring. So we have to teach this, and this has step-by-step of how you would do this. So hopefully you're going to identify what it is that they want. What are their high value items? Through some sort of preference assessment. You could do this informally by just putting some things out and seeing what kids gravitate towards. You can ask other adults. If the student is verbal, ask them, what do you want to work for today? And find out what it is that they want. So if I was first introducing this, then I'm going to go from first is going to be highly preferred, and then the then is going to be highly preferred, because my goal is to teach the kids that these cards don't mean that we're only going to do the activity that they hate. So maybe they hate writing, so I wouldn't start with writing as my first or then right away. I might, when I taught this with my students, I did first computer and then iPad, because I was just teaching them to transition from activity to activity, to move from a highly preferred thing to another highly preferred thing. And then I gradually introduced non-preferred task first as the first expectation. So we started out first computer, then iPad, and then eventually I moved to, I knew that they liked reading, but they still enjoyed reading, so then I did first reading and then iPad. And eventually I stepped that down to where I could put in the activities that I needed, but I have to make sure of what the kids want and what their preferred, what are they working for here? How am I going to motivate them by figuring out what kind of things provide them with good reinforcement? So the great thing about visual supports and first then boards is that you can make these on the fly, right? The example on the left is just a simple whiteboard. So first math, then iPad. The example on your right is more formal. I've printed that out. You can tell it's been printed and laminated. I have hand drawn these. I could write this on an index card in the moment. Even for some kids, I've utilized some hand drawn pictures. So whatever you have, these are a great option for home, because I think they're easily makeable by anyone. So thinking about that, these might need to be utilized at home this year. They're also a great resource for the classroom. So first work, then iPad. But the important thing to remember is, what do kids like? How do I find out what their reinforcers are? And we're going to talk about reinforcement next and the properties of that. But figuring out what do they like, and then how do I use that to get from them what I need in the classroom setting. So let's talk about reinforcement. Reinforcement is a really important concept to understand and to know about, and I want us to stay with positive reinforcement in the education field. I think it's very important that we stick with positive reinforcement whenever possible. So reinforcement means that if you do something that I need you to do, so I set up some situation where I'm asking you to do something, then you immediately get something that you like, and the hope is that the student will become more engaged in similar behavior again in the future under the same context. So an example of this is that with my son, when he was in fourth grade, he had some struggles with math and writing, and he hated doing his schoolwork, math and writing especially. So I set up a reinforcement schedule that said every day you will get 25 cents for completing your math work at school. You will get 15 cents for completing your writing assignments at school. If you have to bring them home because you refused to work, or because you just didn't utilize your time wisely, then I won't pay you anything. So he got paid essentially, right? So think about this as an adult. I come to work and I love my job, but I come to work because I also get a paycheck. So in students' concept, that reinforcement is their paycheck. And as adults, you know, if your paycheck stops coming, would you continue to go to work every day as consistently as you do now? Probably not, right? Probably eventually you would be like, not today. I don't think I'm interested in engaging in that behavior today. I don't have enough reinforcement. So this is the most widely applied principle of ABA interventions. So I think that's important to know. So we have to find out what kids want. What are their things that they really like? Maybe it's an iPad, maybe it's stickers, maybe it's money. And I know that's harder in a school setting. So, but maybe you set up your own. I've seen schools that have honey money stores, or even just a little classroom store. Think about what kids want, and then how can we use that to get what we need. And we know for kids with autism that they probably need to be reinforced more frequently, especially in the beginning of learning a new concept Or if it's a skill that's really hard for them, then they may need a higher rate of reinforcement. So I can't wait a week to get my trip to the Honey Money store. I might need a smaller reinforcement every day versus that longer wait. For some of our kids, we know with autism that they have unusual reinforcers. They like things like, I had a student who liked to fluff the little pom-pom balls in front of his eye. He liked to just kind of drop them. It was some sort of visual stimuli. And once I figured out that that's what he liked, then I could get him to sit down and engage with me, or just engage in some sort of task or activity for a very few minutes in the beginning. But I did begin to get some work out of him because I had the key to his cooperation. So figuring out what kids like, and then what your primary goals are. What do I need them to do? And then using that reinforcement to get some positive work out of them is a great way to start. And if you think about it, as adults, we all seek out positive reinforcement. We all seek out things that are reinforcing positively to us. So think about it as your paycheck. And this is students' paycheck. How do we provide them a paycheck to get them to do what we need them to do for us? So here are a couple of links to great resources. Victories in Autism has a ton of visual supports that are free printables, accessed and available to anyone, that has a printer and the internet. And the indiana.edu resources are visual support options that are very good and have some nice options on there. So we are at the end of this training, and I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, you are welcome to contact me at this email address. I do try to respond to them, so feel free to contact me. And I thank you for your time, and I hope that you found this helpful. Have a great day.